You're listening to Crosschoke, a TFL podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Zach Anderson. Each week, I'm joined by my friend, Dakota Raitan. We have combined experience in music, MMA, Christianity, ministry, video games, and food. We hope we add value to your day. Now, enjoy the show.
Yeah, it's the cross. Jesus went to that cross, and he took the stripes, and he took the nails, and he bore all those things for us. 3 days later, up from the grave, he arose. 3 days later, he rose as King of Kings and as the Lord of Lords.
I never thought we'd get here.
Wow, nice low blow.
I never thought we'd get here.
Yeah, I really sounded like a doofus last week saying that.
No, it was awesome.
I felt like a superhero with the amount of natural reverb in that room.
Yeah, the youth center was a little rough.
Yeah.
But yet, here we are.
Episode
4.
5?
4, yeah. 4, and we're in your office, so we've had 2 consecutive episodes. Well, okay, they're not consecutive, but 2 episodes in the same spot.
Wow, good for us.
I mean, this is a milestone. Do you want to run to Dairy Queen or something? Or
a week ago, we didn't think we would have even gotten to this point.
we didn't? Like you
No,
you weren't confident?
No, our goal was to be in a different place.
We were supposed to be in Jake's house.
Oh, yeah.
I never got the chance to talk to his mom.
I was hoping to do it in McDonald's, but they said they couldn't allow that.
Did they frown upon it?
Yeah.
I bet their Wi-Fi's better than here.
You're right.
Yeah, it's probably better than my house.
Probably.
Yeah, how you been, bro?
Pretty good. It's been a pretty good week.
Okay.
It's
Welcome to Season 1, Episode 4 of Crosschoke, a TFL podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Zach Anderson. I'm joined by the one and only Big Daddy, Dakota.
That's right.
That's right, bro.
I am technically a father.
Well, I know you like BioShock.
I do love BioShock.
And sometimes I jokingly call you Big Daddy.
That's true.
So it fits together. Like peanut butter and jelly.
It's appropriate.
Like Cross and Choke.
Like Vin Diesel and Zach Anderson.
Like organic and hipster.
If you haven't listened to last week's episode, really, you should go back and check
We
it
might
out.
be referencing it a lot, so if you don't know these inside jokes, go listen to episode 3.
Or don't and just accept the surprise of it.
Or just accept our randomness like
Yeah.
you have for the first 3 episodes anyways.
Exactly.
So, Dakota, I went to a Higan Machado seminar in Pocatello last Sunday.
Now, I'm
Sorry,
guessing
Saturday.
that guy is Brazilian.
I think you're right.
Because there is an R in his name.
Yep. But you pronounce it as a... You could just said H. So I went to Higan Machado.
That's the wrong consonant.
Higan. Oh, wait, sounds like Arabic. Wait, sounds like a bird.
That sounded like a guy fell off of a train.
Oh, no. Anyways, he's an 8th degree red and black belt, and if you're not familiar, that's super high, really hard to get up there, and you got to be in the game for a long time to have that much experience. He got under Carlos Gracie, and what's really interesting about Higan is he has some star power. Okay, so like Chuck Norris trained under him, Ashton Kutcher trained under him, Wiz Khalifa. I mean, Mel Gibson. I mean, just Google it. It just keeps going on and on.
Zach Anderson.
I mean, you always throw me off when you do those
I'm
games.
so sorry.
I mean, sure. I'm
He's
a
got
star.
some star power. No, that's way cool.
But dude, yeah, it was really good. The venue was a little sketchy.
Really?
It was in Pocatello. Okay, if you're listening from Pocatello, I'm sorry to say this, but it's like a ghost town, bro.
Oh, wow.
And especially where we were in the mall, it just was like you had to go through like a dungeon to go because so you go in the front
So like
doors.
our mall.
I felt just at home. No, you go through and like half the lights are off and like the flooring is scraped up And there's this table, and she goes, "Oh, are you here for the seminar?"
What the?
I'm like, "Oh yeah," and then she was telling us where the bathrooms were. She goes, "Oh yeah, so you go around Goblin's Corner,
She
keep
did
going."
not say that.
Yeah, yeah, and so we found
Past
where
the Hobbit.
yeah, so you go by Goblin's Corner,
Take a right at the dragon.
and some guys in, and it was actually a store. It looked really really like professional.
Oh, that's good.
In the middle of nowhere, but he was in there like painting little figurines for like orcs
Oh, that's
and
cool.
men, and I was like, I want to go in there.
Yeah.
So anyway, the venue was kind of sketchy, and overall Pocatello was kind of sketchy, but it was a really good seminar. So that was a big highlight of the week. And also, Dakota, I was on my to-do list to hit the banana split
Yes,
yesterday.
you did it.
No,
Oh.
no, it didn't. The opportunity didn't present itself, but I was ready to.
How many more days do you have?
I
About
think
a
I think
week?
we have one more rolling night.
Oh, you gotta do it.
So it's on the to-do list. But dude, last night, so we're recording again on Thursday, a little early. Last night of training, dude, I got hit in the face with an elbow. Can you see it? I thought I was gonna have a black eye, but
It's really not that noticeable.
yeah, dude, it's really tender. But anyhow, so story time. One of the guys at church, I don't remember his name. So anyway, see,
I hope he's listening.
I hope
right
he's
now.
listening too. But I don't think he remembers my name, so it's really great. So I was going down the stairs. We train at Montana Tech. I was coming down the stairs, and I recognized him because he usually has a big beard,
Yeah.
but it's gone. So I recognized him at the last second. It was like, "Oh, what's up, man?" I'm like, "Oh, we're just here for some training. Feel free to poke your head in when you're done, with your workout." And so he goes, "Oh, I'm good at getting kicked and punched." And I'm like, "Oh, you don't got to worry about that. It's BJJ. There's no strikes, no kicks. You're just grappling."
Yeah.
So I'm rolling with my buddy Iceman, and we're just flow rolling, getting warmed up. So it's really, really slow.
Yeah,
Nothing aggressive.
Yeah.
And he goes for this move, and my head's down. And all of a sudden, he comes back with his elbow and just wrecks my face, just right in my eye. I'm like, oh, it was hard. It was really hard. I'm like, ow, covering my eyes. I'm like, okay, rubbing it out. And I look up, and it's that buddy of mine from the church standing in the doorway, going, just with like straight eyes, just like
oh, it's,
what?
It's not.
And so I go over to him. He goes, "I thought you said there's no striking." And I'm like, of all times, you got to walk in. Just then, a friend of mine gets up with a bloody nose. Go.
Jeez, he's probably like, what kind of BJJ are they doing in here?
Oh, so
Australian BJJ
Yeah.
or something?
yeah. So I felt bad for him, but anyhow, it's been a good week. I'm super sore.
That's
A lot of
good.
jujitsu this week. Any highlights from your week, bro?
Oh man, my daughter has been pulling herself up almost into the standing position.
Oh, is she crawling, or is she
No.
skipping crawling?
I don't know. Like, she knows how to crawl. She just doesn't. She'll turn a lot, but not necessarily go forward. But that's been kind of fun. Yeah, work's been good. We had a pirate theme night, outreach night for youth ministry. And so I got to make a lot of great pirate jokes, dress like a pirate, and then delivered a pretty cool, just short sermon about
Pirates?
Well, it's technically parable of the hidden treasure in the field.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, so it was really good.
Very cool.
So that was really fun.
Very cool. And you've been going through a series of parables, right?
Yeah.
That's been kind of your theme.
Oh yeah,
Cool.
lots you can learn from those.
Yeah, definitely. There's a reason Jesus used them so much,
Yeah.
which gets us into the can opener. Dakota, we have 3 items on our We have 3 items on our housekeeping list. Number 1.
The audio last week, it wasn't perfect. So just apologies. We want to have the most excellent video. What video? We want to. We want to have the most excellent podcast and audio for all of you, because we want to do this in a way that we feel honors God. So just know last week was kind of a fluke. We were in a really airy room, and hopefully this week's audio is much better. On top of that, I EQ'd our intro, outros, and we have even some more sound bites to incorporate this week with some new categories.
Which I think people really like.
Oh, yeah.
Which leads us to point number 2 is thank you for leaving reviews and ideas for future shows. People have really been engaging tflministries.com/podcast to be a part of the show, which is really exciting. because again, that's part of why we do what we do. So thank you for leaving reviews, feedback, and being part of the show through different questions that we ask for, like, banana split, what's an embarrassing story, or walkout song of the week. People really have been engaging in that. So thank you.
Yeah, and we are halfway through season 1 of our podcast, and I'm really excited to keep going. Season 30, 32.
89.
Yeah, why not? But to do so, just leaning on that second point, we do need a lot of feedback. So let us know what kind of topics you want to hear in the future, and that'll help us make better content for all of you.
Absolutely. So, Dakota, without further ado, is that how you say that? Further ado?
Yes.
It doesn't sound quite right when you say it slow. You know, like some phrases that you just
It's spelled even weirder, too.
Do you know how to spell it?
No.
Do you know how to here's a
My
tough one.
guess is Adue. But like probably with an apostrophe in
Like Coeur d'Alene. Try and spell Coeur d'Alene.
Never.
All right, here we go. I'm going to ask Siri. Spell Coeur d'Alene. Wait.
Hi there. What's up?
Just doing a podcast. What's up with you?
Spell without further ado. Oh.
Here's what I found.
She just says ADO.
Oh, like ado?
Yeah. Without further ado.
That doesn't seem fancy enough.
I want like some
I wouldn't
French
put that
in
in an
there.
essay.
No. What, are you lazy? Did you not have spell check on? You have A and do put together.
Okay, I never
Dope.
thought we would expand on this.
Self-esteem. So today what we're going to talk about is this idea of self-esteem. How do we evaluate where our self-esteem is? How do we have better self-esteem? What does it mean to have better self-esteem? So Dakota, in this idea, how would you describe positive self-esteem or maybe negative self-esteem? Maybe we could talk about that for a sec. What's the difference? Is self-esteem unchangeable? What are your kind of some initial thoughts you have on it?
So first, just to kind of clarify a definition, in researching self-esteem, I think it really is a gauge for how we're viewing our own self-confidence. And I think confidence and just looking inwards on yourself and your appearance too has a lot to do with self-esteem.
There's so many factors that could come in to what influences your self-esteem. And so we're going to be looking at a couple different sources of content, because we're not just going to be talking about what's your opinion, my opinion, although we will. But a lot of the information that we're going to talk about, of course, we're going to be referring to a couple Bible verses and a couple books that I've read recently called Invisible Imprint, as well as Healing from Damaged Emotions. Both are really good books, talk a lot about self-esteem, what factors into self-esteem. So we're going to pull some stuff from there, maybe some stories that you have or I have, and just kind of really discuss self-esteem. What does it look like? How do we have better self-esteem? What is God's picture of self-esteem? Maybe what does self-esteem look like for competitors?
Mm-hmm.
How do you have better self-esteem on the mats?
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing. So we just kind of want to dive in. A lot of this is going to kind of be organic. I have some guidelines for us, but we're just going to kind of talk about it. So the first thing that I wanted to mention here is, in order to understand our own self-esteem and how to develop a more positive self-esteem, is we have to understand our own presence. And so everyone has a presence. You have presence, I have presence, and so many things factor into how our presence is defined. And so somebody might be saying, okay, what does this have to do with having a better self-esteem?
Sure.
And a better sense of self-esteem?
Because most people would assume self-esteem is just looking inwards to yourself.
Exactly. It's all introspective almost. But understanding our own presence is important in this discussion, because our self-esteem is directly related to our presence.
Okay.
And here's why. Our outward attitude and behavior is always a product of our inner life. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, because who I am on the inside
Yep.
will dictate who I am on the outside.
Yeah, and you can fake it. People can for a little while, but at the root of it, even the Bible says what flows out of your mouth stems from what's inside of your heart.
Yeah, totally. Inside reflects the outside. And what's interesting about this, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, our battle is not against flesh and blood, that there's more than our eyes see.
Mm-hmm.
And both God and Satan are fighting for expression through your presence, right? Because,
Yeah.
you think of an evil person, you think of a holy person. That's their presence that you're talking about. We don't say presence, but,
Sure.
you automatically connect attributes to an evil person, attributes to a holy person or whatever, And whoever you allow to impact your ideas, your urges, and your fantasies is revealed through your conversations, your attitudes, your behaviors, your actions. So the higher power that you allow to influence your mind will have expression through your presence, which is kind of a mouthful to say whoever you allow to influence you will be expressed through your presence.
Absolutely.
Now, a verse that I thought was really appropriate for this is Proverbs 23:7. It really kind of drives this whole idea is, for as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. So if we allow God to influence our thoughts and our memory, we're on our way to achieving our divine potential because our self-esteem is positive, which we'll see is directly related to all of this. But if we allow the enemy to impact our mind, he will detract from our potential because our self-esteem is negative. And I think those two are go hand in hand. Your potential is related to your self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I have low self-esteem, there's no way I'm going to step out and try something new.
Sure.
There's no way I'm going to, do something that I wouldn't normally do.
Yep.
Because I'm so cozy in my low self-esteem comfort zone. How can we allow God to influence our current thoughts and our recollection of the past?
I think we need to, going back to the point of presence, our ultimate goal is to be holy like God as believers and Christians. And so I think we need to focus on God's presence. What's it like? What are the attributes that he has? Because he's defined as holy, and then when you look up the definition of holy, holy is literally defined as, in the Bible, as every attribute that God is. It's kind of like it circles back on itself.
Mm-hmm.
But so when thinking about how we can allow God to influence us, I think if we focus on who God is and the presence that he has and we try to emulate that, that'll affect our self-esteem in turn.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And it's important too to understand that they're both fighting at the same time for my attention.
Sure.
What I let into my life will ultimately determine what I think of myself.
Yeah.
Whether it be through music, video, podcasts, movies, whatever, other people.
Yeah.
Especially other people. Who I let into my life is really important because we need to learn to connect the dots between what's influencing me and the way I behave.
Right.
And the way I think of myself, the way that my ideas are influencing my actions.
Right.
How are those different things influencing me, therefore influencing my presence?
Sure, because regarding influencing, there's only two things that you can do. Is you can either be influenced by something or you can influence someone else.
Mm-hmm.
There's always that relationship. Let's say you're going to coffee with someone and you're having a discussion about a certain topic, either their points are going to be influencing you or your points are going to be influencing them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's determined by my self-confidence again.
Sure, exactly.
Because if I'm waving back and forth with my identity issues, I'm easily influenced by the trending thing. Those people are popular. I'm going to go with them.
Yeah, and I know I was a lot like that when I was a baby Christian, when I had first given my life to Jesus, where I would see something online, I read an article maybe regarding a political issue specifically, and I'd immediately lean towards that. Even like really hard topics like LGBT and things, I would always turn and side with the first thing that I read and saw, even as a Christian, instead of going back on those roots that I should have had but have now grown into and saying, what does the Bible say about this? Where am I grounded? And allowing that to influence me rather than the first thing that I see.
Yeah, and I think when God's opinion is the most important thing in us, that's where we'll turn to.
Absolutely.
And I don't remember the quote. I've heard multiple pastors say this, but like what I turn to in times of crisis, the first thing that I turn to is the most important.
Yeah. Or
when I think of God, what's the first thing you think about when you think of God?
Sure.
That's the most important. So if I think judgmental or mad at me, that is a huge clue to why your self-esteem might be positive or negative.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're totally right in that, man. Like if God is the first, then I know everything else will come behind that, and I'm not
Absolutely.
swayed left and right by
Right.
whatever.
So here's something that the Bible says about this in Matthew 6, verses 22 and 23. It says, "The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness."
Yeah, do you want to explain what that might mean a little bit?
Sure. I mean, exactly what we're talking about.
yeah.
Whatever our focus is on is what we're going to eventually emulate. If our eyes are focused, because wherever your eyes are pointed to, that's where you're going to go. For instance, let's say someone was walking down the street, an opposite sex of you, and you were attracted to that person. If your first reaction is your eyes glance at a part that maybe you're not supposed to, or your first thought is something you're not supposed to, that's a good sign that your self-image, your influence is in the wrong area. If your eyes tend to not even notice that, or focus on something else, or maybe maybe I should pray in this instance or whatever, that's a good way to know that your eye is healthy instead of unhealthy.
Because the eyes will influence my mind, which will influence my heart, which is like who I am.
Right.
And again, which can be defined as our presence. So what I let into my eyes or my ears or my senses is way more important than I ever think we give it credit for.
Sure.
And I think the enemy does a really good job of saying, oh, it's just culture.
Yeah.
It's what we do. It's how commercials look.
Right.
It's how bodybuilding commercials look.
Sure.
Whatever. Like that. We could be pretty dull to the reality of the spiritual warfare happening
Right.
for our mind, for our imagination, for our urges, for our fantasies. And so I think it's really important that we are aware of the silent battle happening for our will in the process of our thinking.
Yeah.
And we sometimes it's so subtle that we don't see it unless we're looking for it, unless we
Right.
start evaluating, okay, how do other people feel in my presence? Most of the time we're really aware of how other people make us feel.
Sure.
Rarely does a person look inside and say, okay, how do other people feel when I enter a room?
Yeah.
And when we start looking at those cues, we could start making the correlation between our presence and the second thing that's really important in understanding our self-esteem, which is self-concept. And now self-concept is this idea that consists of the feelings and ideas that we acquire about ourselves from the words and actions of others, particularly the parents and the family members in our lives. And in one of the books there that we mentioned, either Invisible Imprint or Healing from Damaged Emotions, it talks about adult mirrors.
Yeah.
Now, have you ever been in a fun house with like those really crazy mirrors that are wavy and
Of course.
like you step in front of one and you look like a 300-pound person,
Yeah.
or all of a sudden you look like Mini-Me in
Yeah.
another one. But the adults in our adolescence, in our infancy, even prior to us being born, are already building our self-concept, because your mom, your dad, say if you don't have a mom, you never grew up with a mom or you never grew up with a dad, or you're neither, whatever. You are already building this idea of self-concept through the adult mirrors in your life. You see yourself for what they see you as. So let's say in the instance of an unplanned pregnancy.
Sure.
Okay, maybe that child isn't wanted. Now let's say they end up having the baby, but before that baby's already born, it's already almost hated and resented by its parents, which is already playing into that baby's subconscious level of who that baby is.
Yeah, it knows environment is huge. There was tons of stuff that I read when Abby was pregnant with Nora about environment. We made it a point to read a lot while she was pregnant, specifically for the baby. I know it seems weird, but just emulating this environment that it's safe here. We're gonna talk about things like
You're loved.
Yeah, absolutely.
We want you.
And that's just the hugest. That's one of the biggest things, is just to make known that the child is loved, because that's a huge influence.
And as imperfect parents, we do our best in that, right?
Yeah.
I'm not a parent, but you are. Now, looking to ourselves as adults, okay, we still have a self-concept that's being developed all the time. I think I've read it before where your self-concept can be defined by everything in your past up till right now.
Okay.
Everything in your past up till right now has built you into who you see yourself as.
Okay.
Whether it's your choices or not, But what we were talking about before is, as adults, we have to take responsibility over our actions.
So I think that's a really good point to think about back on that scripture again with the as the eye is the lamp. Because when you think about a lamp, it's something that you have to physically turn on. Let's say something an image or whatever floats by, and it could even be the enemy trying to tempt you into something, or maybe an adult in your life has said something to you. As adults now, as someone that can make a conscious decision, we have the ability to turn off that lamp. I don't want to see that. I don't want to bring that into my mind. But that's kind of different when you're a kid. You don't always have that consciousness to
Exactly.
do that.
Exactly, yeah. Which is one of the points in this idea of ways to develop a healthy self-image, right? We're adults. Maybe we need to hear grow up.
Yeah,
I think it's easy to blame stuff on our parents.
absolutely.
I
It's a
can't,
great
yeah,
cop out.
yeah, I can't do this because my parents were doing this.
Yeah.
I can't do this because my parents always said this. Whatever. Even we might not even know it, but there
Sure.
comes a time in every person's life, every adult's life. Whenever you reach that point, maybe it's in high school, somewhere in there, at college, some point, there comes, maybe you're 59, I don't know, maybe you're 100, I don't know, but there
Yeah.
comes a point in every adult person's life when you have to reevaluate everything you've been taught and compare it to Scripture and take ownership over your life. We are responsible for our presence. We are responsible for our own self-concept, because there's ways in which we ignore it. Like you
Yeah.
were saying, we could just cop out to our parents
Yeah.
or just say, "Oh, my life's this way,"
And that's just
so
a
it's been
super
this way.
negative way. Having good self-esteem
Hmm.
requires a conscious decision. It requires purposeful action to have that.
Yeah, it's not just
Because
going to happen.
exactly.
Yeah,
And
it's
I
not
think
just
that's a
going to happen.
huge key concept in having good self-esteem. You look at an example of someone who doesn't have good self-esteem. A lot of times it'll tie back into, well, are they trying to have good self-esteem? Are they looking into it? Are they focusing on those attributes?
And here's 3 ways that I took from um, Healing from Damaged Emotions. It has three areas in the book where it talks about developing a healthy self-image. And number 1, it says a sense of belonging. Number 2, a sense of worth and value. And number 3, a sense of being competent, which we kind of already hit. Being
Sure.
responsible for my own actions. But what do you think about belonging, worth, and value?
Well, I was going to ask you, are those things that we are responsible for, again, as adults, or is that something that has already been tied into us at the beginning?
Do you think a person always belongs yet is deceived as if they don't? Specifically, what I'm talking about
Sure.
is, say, the family of God.
Okay.
Because I think these things should already be there. Okay, like, say, as a parent, you want to make sure your child feels belonging,
Yeah.
has worth, has value. You slowly build it in competence. Okay, you do it now,
Yeah.
whatever. Now, I think the church should function as this.
Absolutely.
If the church isn't this, or it doesn't offer healing for real emotional pain, then padlock the church.
Yeah.
If the gospel doesn't provide genuine healing for damaged self-concepts and self-image, then what are we doing?
Sure.
So, in this idea of, does a person have belonging or develop belonging or
Sure.
search out belonging? The call of God is real on people all the time,
Yeah.
and the church should be this answer. Whether your family says you don't belong, the church should be that.
Sure.
So I guess part of it is our responsibility to search this out. I think that's why the enemy can play this and say, "Hey, you belong with the thugs," or "You belong with this group of people who are, not following God."
Yeah.
And you can have worth, you can have value, you can have ownership.
Are
in
you
this
saying you think that unbelievers can have good, healthy self-esteem if they have a sense of belonging in where they're at, a sense of worth and value, and being competent? Even outside of the biblical view, do you think someone could be healthy in their self-esteem?
I don't think if it's not rooted in God, then I don't think so. Because what's truly fueling their self-esteem?
I would have to agree with you there.
It could appear as if so.
Yeah.
And the Bible talks about that
Yeah.
unbelievers will thrive and look better than believers will.
Sure.
So I think at the core of it, if our lives aren't rooted in God, it's just a mannequin. It's just a mannequin lifestyle. What is that? What is that party where you wear like the little face mask? A masquerade.
Yeah.
There we go. Because we could have the masquerade of self-esteem
Okay.
and not have a relationship with God, but yet it's undermined by this emptiness of I'm the self-made man, or I'm going to prove the haters wrong, and that could give the appearance of self-esteem, but that almost turns into a prideful thing, which we'll talk about in a moment.
Sure.
Of what are the misconceptions behind self-esteem? So I don't think a person can truly have a positive self-image or self-esteem outlook without
Sure.
God. Is that true?
I would agree. I would say you can think that you do.
Right.
I'm thinking back to before I was a Christian, and I'm thinking, did I have any of these things? Well, I think I thought I had belonging in where I was. But what would happen if, let's say my belonging was in the friendships I had?
Mm-hmm.
What would happen if all those friends went away? Where would my
Sure.
belonging go? It would go away too. I think that's the difference between self-esteem and self-image as a Christian versus not a Christian, is because that rooting is in something that is unfallible.
Yeah.
We
It's
know
never
that
changing.
our belonging is not going to change.
Yep.
Once we're a child of God, we're in the family.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to get divorced from the family,
That's true though.
Yeah.
It's never changing. It's never changing. So God doesn't change, therefore my self-esteem can continue to increase and increase as my relationship with him grows.
Yeah.
Not pride. My pride doesn't grow.
Yeah.
But my dependence upon God does. Therefore, I can be confident and have a high self-esteem.
Exactly.
Everything else, again, is just a mannequin or masquerade.
Yeah.
And I think something, and a couple of my friends in TFL, something that they have mentioned before is the relief that happens when
Yeah.
you come to God. Because I don't have the pressure to perform anymore.
Yep.
I don't have to dig deeper and deeper within myself, hoping to find the gold nugget of confidence.
Yeah.
Because I can produce nothing good from myself.
Absolutely.
I have nothing to offer but
Right.
surrender to God. And that's what he wants.
Mhm.
Everything else I think is just a cop-out.
And I think you mentioned that even last week on fighting. You don't really care if you win or lose. To you, going out there and giving it all, that's a win no matter what. And I think that is something that's rooted in healthy self-esteem. Not to toot your horn or anything,
No.
but
Thank you.
Zach, you are the perfect model of healthy self-esteem.
Me and Vin Diesel.
But here's another thought. When you step into kingdom, and comparing it to a family, when you're born, you get the last name, right? It's our responsibility and duty to know how the family operates. Like, there's going to be that sense of belonging, that sense of worth and value. But it's our responsibility to look in and know how our self-image works. But at the root of it all, it's just kingdom.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. As we develop a healthy self-concept, we develop a healthy presence. And the bridge between those two, I think, is a positive self-esteem.
Yeah.
Which is the third, and final idea. If we understand our presence, we understand our self-concept, we have a better understanding of why our self-esteem is what it is and how to better our self-esteem. Some misconceptions about self-esteem. We were talking about pride, pride versus humility. And I think Christians have a hard time with this because we could almost, again, use God as a scapegoat or a
Sure.
crutch without me having to take responsibility. Because I always say this, God gave you a brain for a reason,
Yeah.
and he gave you emotions for a reason. We're to honor him with those. He gave us the ability to be ambitious, things like that. And so it's okay to be confident as a Christian.
Yeah.
You don't have to have this, woe is me attitude.
Right.
And that in and of itself, self-pity, I'm almost
Sure.
getting to that point. That in and of itself is a form of pride.
Sure.
It is a form of pride because you're making it about you. If anything is about me in the sense of my worth, my self-esteem, all these things, if I'm trying to find them in me, it's a sense of pride.
Mm-hmm.
But godly self-esteem in and of itself can be meek, can be confident,
Yeah.
can be bold. And I think that's how God wants us to operate.
Sure.
We operate in our Christian faith almost as if the light is red,
Yeah.
then green. And we get trigger shy, things like that. And so godly self-esteem says yes. And I think, hopefully that is clicking with somebody, like, go for it.
Yeah.
God says, God
It's
loves
okay
you.
to be successful.
Yeah, it's okay to have money. It's okay to be happy.
Yeah.
It's okay to have a little zep in your step. Zep? What? Who says zep? I think it meant zip and pep.
And pep.
Zep.
I think there's a balance that we have to focus on between humility and pride.
Mm-hmm.
They're both really key components in your self-esteem. But you can't be all one or the other.
Mm-mm. Yeah, and finding the balance there is important. But if I'm pointing to Jesus, He's my source. He's my go-to. Everything. Like he's at mission control. I could keep going forward.
Maybe we should act like the stoplight's yellow, so we can either gun it or slam on the brakes.
Okay, you're approaching a light. It's yellow. What's your go-to move?
So, in this town, my go-to is usually hit the brakes until my brain says, you don't need to hit the brakes, step on the gas. Because it's about time for the roads to be super icy, and so... Actually, I take that back. Because, when the roads are icy and the stoplight's yellow,
Oh,
you can't stop.
no way.
Just keep going.
No, you're
It'll be
more of
red
a-
for 2 seconds. It's all right.
If you hit the brakes while it's icy, you're going to be that guy that's slowly turning sideways in the middle of the intersection while everybody's watching. Then you're like, oh, now I got to move. So you hit the gas, then you're peeling out in the middle of the intersection. Don't be that guy.
Don't be that guy. So, when the light is yellow in your self-esteem, hit the gas.
That's right. Hit the gas. All right, let's reel things back in here.
Okay.
Come on, got me a Marlin! Yeah!
Talking about the balance of humility and pride, Mark 12:31, I think, really describes this point well. You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. The second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. So, Dakota, what is the difference between self-love and love of self? Is there a difference? What does that look like?
I think, again, this all ties into what is it rooted in? Is it rooted in God or is it rooted in ourselves? Because one, self-love, I think we can worship God in loving ourselves, taking care of our bodies, physically, working out, eating right, and then also emotionally and mentally taking care of our bodies. But then the other, loving yourself, I think you're now changing the role and you're now idolizing yourself.
Yeah.
You are just trying to fill a void and trying to do whatever feels good, which I think is another pretty big misconception that the world tries to throw at you, to just do whatever feels good. And I think that can really affect your self-esteem, because all you're doing is putting yourself in this role where you're focusing on things that are not going to be here for the rest of your life. There's nothing that is going to carry on into your eternity except for your soul. That's it. So I think that's the main difference between those two. What do you think is a physical difference in your opinion?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the nail on the spot, I was going to say.
Wow, we're great at
Bro, you hit
these
the nail on the
phrases.
spot. What is that phrase? You hit the...
Nail on the head.
There you go.
Wow. You punched the guy in the mouth on that one.
You ever tried to come up with sayings?
I did come up with one actually last week.
Oh, yeah. What was it?
I work with a really cool guy named Chuck from Louisiana. And so he has all these really cool slang and phrases that he uses. Did you know they say catty corner in the South? They
No.
don't say kitty corner.
Hmm.
Like, let's say there's a house diagonal from
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
You'd say, oh, it's kitty corner from me. They say catty.
Hmm.
Yeah, isn't that weird? So anyways, we were talking, and I was like, I bet I can make one up on the spot. And so I did, and I said, wow, you're changing that thing out more than fish hooks on a shark pole. He thought it was the greatest thing ever.
So my good friend Jake and I used to try to come up with them on the spot.
Oh,
You know,
perfect.
so like here's one on the spot. Like, oh, there's the key that broke the text. Oh, there's the lampshade that got dusty, huh? I don't know.
And what was the one you just said? Hit the
There
nail
was-
on the spot.
Yeah, I just hit that nail on the spot, huh? Okay. Thanks for listening to episode 4 of Cross Joke.
Episode 4 of making your own sayings on the spot. Hope you learned something.
My self-esteem is through the roof.
That's just a coincidence.
So in recapping, okay, we hit a lot pretty fast. You could talk on this subject for quite a bit, but is inferiority, inadequacy, low self-worth is what the enemy wants in your life. Because again, it will rob God of a marvelous opportunity to show off his power and ability through your weakness.
Absolutely.
And I think that is the difference between self-love and love of self, is if I love myself, it means I love myself the way God does, and I submit myself to his lordship, his power. In my weakness, he is strong.
Yeah.
And if I allow God to influence my thoughts like that, you know, what does God think of me? If I get into the Word, if I allow him to build my self-concept, that'll make his presence in me, which will make my presence more positive. Now, through those two things, self-esteem will rise because God is influencing my identity. And that hopefully is the point of this podcast today is allow God to influence you through ideas, urges, fantasies, your self-concept, and start to examine what that looks like for you in your life. How is the devil playing you? You know, how is God trying to get your attention? How does the enemy recall your past? How does God recall your past?
Yeah.
So Dakota, do you have any areas in your life where you struggled with high self-esteem or low self-esteem or anything like that?
Just to recap, in a personal story, if I can be vulnerable
Oh.
for just for a minute, I think a huge part of my struggle with self-esteem in the past has a lot to do with comparisons. Even in my role as a worship leader, there's a lot of times where I'll see someone else doing the same thing that I feel I'm called to do and say, wow, they do it so much better than I do. Their voices. If only I had their voice, I could step into this confidence. And I think that goes back to a lot of what you were saying earlier about the bar and the level that we set for ourselves. When you don't have self-esteem, you just kind of assume you're stuck where you're at with no room to grow. But the thing about having a healthy self-esteem is knowing that you can grow with this ability that God has given you, because God's ability, there's no limit. He is potential
Potentialist.
Yes.
Potentialness.
God is potential.
His potential is without end.
Absolutely.
I don't know.
That's
Something.
exactly what I'm trying to say, though. And when we know that we're in that family, that we don't have to compare ourselves to other people, because we now know that our potential is without limit.
All right, so let's go ahead and get into Walkout Song of the Week.
And his name is John C.
So Nick Babcock actually suggested this song. I made a post on Facebook. Tons of feedback. Great songs out there. Some are super funny. Some are really good. And again, Dakota, I want to let you know, somebody suggested Sandstorm.
Wow, I honestly cannot believe that.
It's just hype level to the max, bro. Time has no effect on Sandstorm.
I'm going to suggest the SpongeBob theme song.
What's funny is I feel like I know 2 fighters off the top of my head that would walk out to that.
3 if you include yourself.
I am one of the 2.
Oh,
No.
Perfect.
California Love by Tupac. which was really popular with Uriah Faber. Would walk out to that all the time. He's since retired, I think, from MMA. Still does some jiu-jitsu tournaments and stuff, but really, really hype song that way.
Let me ask you a question about walkout songs.
Okay.
Now, in the NFL, they can retire jersey numbers, so no one else can have that jersey. Can they retire a walkout song? Hypothetically, not something they actually have a ceremony for, but would you see someone else using this song by Tupac? Or is it kind of like cringy? Like if someone plays it, you're kind of like, why are they doing that? This other person really, that's kind of their song.
Yeah. It's so cringy. It's like an unspoken etiquette.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't use somebody else's walkout
I just wanted to make
song.
sure.
I think in the amateur realm, I mean, guys use other people's songs. And,
Sure.
Old Town Road has been big the last year.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
that
I
was
bet a lot of fighters use that.
Ton of guys did. Jake and I refer to Jake like 2 times an episode.
That's right.
I miss my friend. But we were at a fight once doing judging. We were judging the fights. And I don't remember if he said it or if I said it. I was like, it was right when Old Town Road was just big.
Yeah.
And I go, I bet you at least one person is going to walk out to that tonight. And boom, you hear it, and we're like, yep, there it is. That guy's going to win. But yeah, you don't use somebody else's walkout song if it's part of their identity. Like I think most people that would at least follow me know I walk out to Represent by Lecrae.
Yeah.
But I've since had it remixed a little bit to Can't Be Touched with Roy Jones Jr. mixed in with it. It's pretty hype.
What if it worked like this? That if you won a fight, you got the rights to your opponent's walkout song.
Oh, that'd be great.
And they could no longer use it.
That'd be funny.
Wouldn't
Kind
that be
of.
fun?
What is that called when you race somebody for their car?
For pink slips.
Is that what it's something like
Something, yeah.
that? Race for
Keep.
slips? Do you just say slips or
That's,
something?
I don't know. I'm not a racer.
What?
I'm not even a fighter.
Well, you are a runner now. I've heard.
I've been known to run to Dairy Queen every now and then.
I still have yet to see you run. You gotta send me like a video of yourself running.
You're such a savage.
I'm not. It's nothing against your self-esteem, bro.
I need to turn my lamp off.
So another segment. I'm excited. We had a submission for this. No pun intended. Banana split. So we had a submission from a good friend of mine, Bogey Valdez, owner of Keep It Real CrossFit here in Butte, Montana. He's been training with us, I don't know, a couple years, maybe hitting on 2 years, a year, somewhere in there. But he submitted this story. He goes, my first BJJ tournament, he had been training with us at Imperial BJJ for maybe 2 weeks. So he totally made like just 4 classes. And he had no rules or no ideas of the rules of the tournament or how to do jiu-jitsu. And he just kind of showed up.
Oh, you're
like,
telling me he entered a tournament after 2 weeks of
after
training?
2 weeks of training.
Oh, wow.
So, and at that time, we didn't really have much in policy of like, okay, you have to train with us for this long to do
Sure.
it. We knew him. He came in and just, made a couple classes.
And he had some martial arts background, right?
Yeah, he had some like hand-to-hand combat stuff. He's a ex-Marine, was a police officer.
Oh, so same background as me.
Yeah, exactly. Just yoked to the max.
Runs all the time.
Runs.
To Dairy Queen and back.
He's an awesome athlete. But man, yeah, he has a great background with Jesus and is growing there. And so, anyhow, he went to this jiu-jitsu tournament, did it anyways, right? Had no idea. He says embarrassing, but humbling and rewarding. The cause and why was greater than any pain I could have possibly gone through that day. So what's funny is I don't think any of us even went with him. It was in Billings, Montana.
Oh my goodness.
And, nobody wanted to drive 3 hours for some guy that showed up for 4 classes. I don't think anybody was there. He just went, representing the gym. Of course, probably didn't do that well.
That's hilarious.
But that was kind of his banana split moment of just training for 4 classes and going to a tournament.
Yeah, that's pretty brutal.
But, again, we love Bogey. Bogey's the man. Nobody's like Bogey. And he just has a great name. You just have to say it over and over.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, have you met Bogey?
I have not met Bogey.
And here's the other thing. So we have nicknames for everybody at class. If you've been around for a while, you get names. You get, name something cool.
I wasn't around long enough to get a nickname.
No.
Probably for the better.
Yeah. I was going to call you, Hippo or something. You ever seen a hippo? Because I was trying to think of an animal that never runs.
So rude. I'd call you the bald eagle then, Zach.
Fair enough. But anyhow, Bogey comes in, and he already has a cool nickname. You know, like another guy that comes in. And,
Oh, that's not his first name?
I don't think so. I think it's James.
It's not like
James Valdez. I actually don't know. I gotta look at his Facebook.
Aurelius.
What'd you say?
Bogus? Aurelius? Imagine your first name is Bogus.
Yeah, that kid's gonna really feel like he belongs. Hey, Bogus, you want to go grab some food?
My friends call me Bogey. No wonder he's yoked. He's been fighting people his whole life.
He's been fighting for that positive self-esteem. So, anyway, there's the banana split segment of the podcast. Thanks for submissions. If you have any other funny stories like that, it could be simple or in-depth, whatever. It doesn't even have to be about you. But go to tflministries.com/podcast, and we'd love to hear your stories.
So we have a brand new segment this week.
The sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God, Jesus Christ.
This was suggested by our friend Isaiah. We're actually going to be sharing a verse of the week for this podcast. So this week's verse is in 2 Corinthians 12, verses 9 through 11. And it says, "But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong."
Man, what a verse, just dripping with hope.
Yeah.
And I think it feeds really well into our podcast this week about
Yeah.
building self-esteem. You know, maybe you're listening and you're like, man, I don't have much to offer anymore. I'm at the end of my rope.
Yeah.
You know, whatever that looks like. But in our weakness, it makes us realize how much we need God.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what Paul says here too is, you know, I delight in my weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong, because I have God. And that's I think we can all learn something from that all the time. All right, time for the book of the week.
When you look into it,
You gotta look into it.
look into it.
I've been
When you
looking
look into it,
Invisible Imprint by Dr. Richard Dobbins. Again, that's where a lot of our content kind of, you know, funneled through to today's discussion. Really, really good book, and I highly suggest it. I've read it through, took a ton of notes on that book. It's kind of hard to find, though. It's not. I didn't find it on anything digital. I had to order it off Amazon, and there was only like 3 copies. So,
Wow.
but I heard about it and wanted to get it. It was part of kind of my journey to better my presence and how I make other people feel, just because I want to represent God better. That was the whole idea behind it. And so that book kind of came up. And so that's the book of the week. Read it, Invisible Imprint. And with that, Dakota, I think we have a full podcast here. So, guys, thanks for joining us for today's podcast. I think we had a great time, Dakota. You're a wise man.
Oh, thank you, Zach. It's always a pleasure doing a podcast with you.
Yep, we really hit the nail on the top. What did I say? I don't remember.
On the spot.
On the spot. There we go. So anyhow, next week, guys, we have a really special interview planned. So be sure to keep eyes out on Facebook, social media. We'll have it all over. And we're really looking forward to that as well. So you get some variety and don't have to listen to me and Dakota. Although, like, I hope you listen to us and like
I
it.
hope you at least enjoy us somewhat if you're listening. Imagine somebody listening to a whole episode and just hating it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, hate those guys.
I hate Bald Eagle and Hippo. They're the worst people I've ever heard in my life. Thank you so much for listening to Crosschoke. We had a lot of fun creating this episode and hope you enjoyed listening. Please submit any requests, stories, or comments at tflministries.com/podcast to stay involved. Remember, Zach reads your comments every night before bed. Don't forget to follow Zach at Ando Butte and myself at South Day. Have an amazing day and join us next week on Crosschoke.